My name is Shahid Lanizi, a senior at Georgetown University in Qatar, majoring in international economics, and I would like to welcome you to our next panel called Everyday Sudan. The session focuses on the ordinary, like daily cultural practices that shape Sudanese life and heritage. Beyond the headlines, it is in the simple acts of dressing, adorning, cooking, and sharing traditions that communities preserve memory, nurture creativity, and pass knowledge across generations. This panel highlights how the everyday sustains cultural memory, enables intergenerational exchange, and reimagines Sudan's living heritage. Before we begin, I would like to share a brief note from Georgetown University. As conveners, we run these discussions in line with Georgetown's long-standing speech and expression policies, and with that, I would like to note a few. First, you are welcome to share your questions. If you would like to submit a question, please use the QR code in your sign holders or on the notebooks in front of you, and please use the format assigned. And the second is that participants are free to use the information in these discussions. However, out of respect for our speakers and to encourage open and honest dialogue, no attributable comments should be disclosed. And with that, let's begin with introducing our moderator, Amna Elidrissy. Amna Elidrissy is an architect specializing in living heritage curation and exhibition design. As key member of Safeguarding Sudan's Living Heritage, she contributes to mapping, research, curating, and developing datasets that document Sudan's historical and cultural narratives. And with that, please join me in welcoming Amna Elidrissy and our panelists. Thank you so much.
Hey, salam alaikum. Thank you very much for that introduction. I'd like to start out by thanking Susie, her wonderful team, Dr. Zara, Misbah, Noor, Maryam, Zara for their patience with us throughout these few days. So thank you very much. I'd like to welcome everyone to our panel and thank you for joining us for this conversation on Everyday Sudan. It's a very tricky topic to come at, I believe. It's, as Tayyib Saleh says, something that we carry within us wherever we've been and wherever we go. It might get personal at times, but we'll try to speak to the professional and broader sense of Everyday Sudan. So I'd like to start out by framing our panel a bit. I'll introduce our wonderful speakers and they'll do their opening remarks. After that, we'll do tailored questions to each and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So just make sure to scan the codes and put in your questions. I'd just like to note that after this, we'll be breaking for lunch and then reconvening at 1 for the Sounds of Sudan panel. So as has been introduced, this panel is an invitation to look closely, not at the headlines, but at the daily rhythms that shape Sudanese life. We're here to explore what Sudan means and looks like in the everyday, in the way we dress, celebrate, cook, wait, speak, and remember. These practices are not just cultural, they are very much personal and intimate. They carry stories, emotions, and the choices shape how each of us relates to Sudan. More importantly, we're asking questions of what happens to the everyday in face of crisis, displacement, and conflict. And how does it continue? What people hold on to, what they don't. We'll hear from our panelists whose work is rooted in these questions and who show us how the ordinary can become a space for creative expression, for memory, for connection. What I'd love to do is begin by introducing our speakers. Our first speaker for today is Omer. He's a Sudanese food archivist and author whose work has deeply shaped how we understand Sudanese food, I believe. From his contributions to Andariya, After Memory, essays on the Sudanese archive, to his most recent publication, The Sudanese Kitchen. If you don't have a copy, you need to go order one. It's described as the first comprehensive cookbook on Sudan in English, but it is not. It's a recipe book and a diary and a journal and a photo album and an archive, and it makes you cry. So his work documents not just how we eat, but how we live, how we remember and pass food on. Um, After that, we have Azza or Ahmed Abdul Aziz, who is a researcher and anthropologist whose work explores how cultural understanding of health and well-being intersects with identities, politics, and social life. Her research delves into the diversity of Sudanese identities and how they shape experiences of exclusion, belonging, and becoming. She is the co-author of Shifting Terrains of Political Participation in Sudan. Azza today will be speaking to the themes of everyday, the identities, the trauma, the continuity, and how these lived experiences manifest across Sudan's social and political terrain. Next, we'll hear from Mohammed Elmur, Simba. He's a costume designer and filmmaker who has designed for some of the most recently the celebrated Sudanese films, including You'll Die at 20, Goodbye Julia, and most recently Cotton Queen by the lovely Susanna Marghani. His work goes beyond the screen. He is also a filmmaker who experiments on fashion films. So he has his own Al Funduk film. He has some avant-garde costume lines that explore how fabric, memory, and identity intersect in visual storytelling. Last but certainly not least, we have Omnia Shawkat. She is a creative and one of the co-founders of Andariya, along with Salma Amin, which is a bilingual digital platform launched in 2015 in Sudan and later on in the East and the Horn of Africa in 2021. So alongside Selma, she has helped build a space that documents, curates, and connects Sudanese stories across borders. With these introductions in mind, we'll now begin with opening remarks from each of our speakers. So we'll start with Omer Al Tijani, who will speak on food and culinary heritage.
Good morning, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for the introduction, Amna. I wanted to thank the organizers, Georgetown, Susie, the teal, everyone. It's been a really wonderful time staying here at the hotel. It's going to be tough going back to our normal lives after this, for sure. But yeah, my name's Omer, author of The Sudanese Kitchen. My work is around the preservation of Sudanese recipes. And I'm British-based Sudanese. So I grew up the majority of my life in the UK and didn't have access to Sudanese recipes. And that's how the project came about. I wanted to collect recipes so I could make them myself without having to rely on my family to bring food parcels to me. And that's how it began, by collecting recipes. And one thing led to another. I started getting funding for it and documenting more and more. I just realized the importance of collecting these recipes as well as the food culture that surrounded the recipes. And it just became important material that needed to be recorded. And I got a lot of support from the online community, eventually got funding from Sudan, and then would spend a lot of time in between the UK and Sudan collecting these recipes and cultural material. It's like a 10-year project, essentially, so I put a lot of work into it. It's a love letter to Sudan, a passion project, a legacy project. And I want to thank the contributors who helped make it happen over the years. La Khair beautifully photographed it. Lafisa, local team. Thank you. Yeah, without them, it definitely couldn't have been the beautiful project that it is today. So I definitely implore you to go out, look into it, and get yourself a copy. But yeah, just wanted to thank everyone for the opportunity. It's important to talk about these issues and the importance of Sudan's cultural legacy. And it's just essential, especially with the erasure going on currently as a result of the war, for our food practices, culinary practices to be recorded for future generations. And this is the backbone of the project. This is why I wanted it to exist, because it didn't exist for me at the time, and I wanted to exist for future generations of Sudanese people, so we can go on practicing our daily lives. Thank you.
Thank you for these remarks, Ahmad. We can now move on to Azza.
Can you hear me? Hello. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for allowing us this opportunity. I speak in a collective we as Sudanese, so we're very honored to be here and we hope to contribute to a discussion. So I think it's important for me to reflect on this war, to reflect on where we are, to reflect on how Sudan is being represented, but to also introduce some of the tensions in terms of what we're expected to do in representing our country or just the space we're in. Like, this is a wonderful space, and it introduces some of the tensions around representing Sudan. So what I'm trying to do is to make the narrative and representation of Sudan align with some of Sudan's contradictions. So I want to just postulate that Sudan is made up of multiple singularities, but I don't want it to be exceptionalized. So I want to kind of historicize our everyday histories and to move past reifying cultural objects, especially in this war. And I want to speak about the fact that there's been a reticence for us not to move past trauma, but how trauma in this context is kind of embodied in what we engage with in terms of the objects we're engaging within Sudan as well as outside of Sudan. So I want this to be kind of a dialogue between because we have a privileged position, we're outside of Sudan, but we also speak not on behalf of the people in Sudan, but I think what we're trying to do is to convey how they're using the objects as well. So how there's a tension between how we represent them and how they're actually represented by people, embodying them and actually using them in the context of this war. So I think it's also important to speak about what people are unwilling to speak about. So we've been criticized for kind of moving past Sudan or forgetting Sudan or being in kind of a context of celebrating. But while we're celebrating, it's not a celebration in the sense that we're forgetting, but it's a kind of a continuation of the contradictions of Sudan because we are alive. So there's a kind of a guilt that comes with that, but there's also a kind of, it's imposed on us in a way. So I think what the objects are actually saying are like the everyday. So when we speak about the objects representing Sudan, like objects which are represented in museums or in displays, they're actually objects that signify things related to the conflict in Sudan, the political economy of Sudan. So even like the colors I'm wearing, for example, they could represent Sudan in the sense that, the criticism of the Sudanese marriage is taking place now, that people have left Sudan, that they don't care about Sudan. This can be quite controversial. The colors evoke gold, but there's also the political economy of gold, which is fueling this war. There are the transitions, the fact that I think the objects, like the death that's happening in Sudan, moving past the statistics or the fact that the death is reprehensible. I think there's an understanding in Sudan in relation to objects and how they use, like, for example, shrouds, how people are supposed to die. So I think what the Sudanese are trying to say is that we're not refusing death because we think of death as an essential part of life, but we're refusing this kind of death. So this death which distances us from our material culture, from our shrouds, for example. The fact that people now are in Sudan, and I want to speak about the people in Sudan, not being able to access an actual shroud to actually bury themselves in a way which is befitting of any human life. So again, this is why I want to introduce this tension about the singularities and to historicize Sudan through material culture, but to actually universalize Sudan as well, so that it resonates with people. So that the idea is that we want to set a narrative versus a discourse. We don't want to be just immersed in kind of representing Sudan, reifying Sudan, or glorifying Sudan, or even ironing out Sudan's contradictions. I want people to engage with Sudan's contradictions so that we actually see Sudan as a lived, embodied place, not just a geographical entity which is voided of its material culture.
Thank you very much for that reflection, Azza. We'll now move on to Simba. The floor is yours.
Well, first, let me start by thanking Georgetown University, Susie, of course, for bringing us all together here. Yep, being a costume designer, or like actually growing up in Sudan for almost the whole duration of Omer Al Bashir's period, every day has been changing so drastically for me because I've spent all my childhood observing Sudan and observing daily life. I think one of the most fun activities I used to do is get on the transport when I have nothing, بص المواصلات العامة, like public transport. I'll sit there and I'll just watch people. I'll watch people, the way they dress, the way they act, their hair, their clothes, and everything. And this has definitely changed throughout the years. The 30 years maybe that Amr al-Bashir was there, it just kept getting very, like very more conserved. Everybody's just, with time and with oppression, people have been like changing from festive Afro-Arab people into like these conservative people who are scared to express themselves, scared to be out there and show their true self. And I was very happy with time after like maybe after the time took place, and then we started making cinema. When I came to do costume, I've always carried with me these observations that I've had, like the small events that I've witnessed, العرس في البيت, my friends, my family. And with these observations, I think I came to form some sort of Sudan that I believe is what I think Sudan is and how I see Sudan is. A lot of it was very based on like what I saw throughout these days. And I'm so glad that I got to like somewhat put them together and share them with other people. But what I see as very special in Sudan is literally every detail of daily life. Like the weddings, the funerals, these things have been very inspiring for me. How we take care of small details, how we care about every little aspect of that event has been so special. And I think this is something that we need to celebrate more and more. We've been missing out on all of these things. Things have been drastically changing. People have been letting go of a lot of these rituals. Yes, they're expensive. Yes, they're costly. But at the same time, they are festive. They're beautiful. They're culture, and they're very us. They speak to us. They speak to our identity. They speak to our heritage and to our culture. And I've always been happy to convey them in my filmmaking and costume making process. So yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Simba. That was a beautiful reflection. Thank you very much. And then we'll move on to Omnia.
Hi everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Sabah al khair. اسمي أمنية. And I also want to thank Georgetown University, Din Masri, Susie, Zara, Misbah, but I specifically want to thank those who've been on their feet for days, who've been taking care of us, who've been smiling, who've been guiding us, the social media team, the cameramen and women, the ushers. Thank you for smiling. Thank you for smelling amazing, because I have not felt welcome in a very long time. Let me explain. I was born in Sudan. I left when I was 3 or 4. My parents were politically persecuted. They decided to leave. We went to Libya, Egypt, Qatar, Hiwaraat, and then 10 years in Egypt, which were my formative years. And all this time, all I knew was I am Sudanese. My parents are only Sudanese. We listened to Sudanese music. We eat Sudanese food. 95% of the friends were Sudanese. All they talked about was Sudan. But I was, and reflecting on this question, I really thought of how amazing it was that they allowed me to kind of distance myself a little. Because so every other year we would travel to Sudan, and it was so overwhelming for me. Asaniya, the big home for the family, all these people, we've always been like a very nuclear family. And slowly, when I turned 18 and my dad said, you can go on and explore the world, I stopped going to Sudan. Only with there's like a wedding for 3 days in and out, but I went everywhere else. And almost 10 years of that time, and then I went back to Sudan. And this time I said, let me get to know this country, because at that point, my sister, my mom, my dad have been so engrossed in Sudan, and they had moved back before me, way before me, a few years before me. But I was finally ready, because I've seen everything. I felt like I've been everywhere. I've seen everything. I've lived in places. And the only thing that felt like I could contribute to, I could belong to, was Sudan, even though I had kept a very nice distance for a long time. Thank you. And I wanted to talk about this because I know a lot of you are in diaspora, right? So what happened when I went back? I went back 6 days later, we launched Enderia. 8 years later, the war broke out. 3 weeks later, I left my home. A week later, I left Sudan. And I've been in Kampala for the last 2 and some years. But those 8 years in Sudan, I was, again, very grateful for my parents to give me that space, but I was a spectator. I was watching and I was learning and I was understanding and I was choosing which of all of these things do I want to associate with. And until today, I am so grateful for making that decision because, especially now, it would have been very difficult for me to reconcile with what's happening right now if I had kept my distance, because my family is in so much pain and all of us are in so much pain. But at least those 8 years of understanding Sudan, unpacking Sudan, it removed that nice rosy veil that my parents always had passionately about Sudan. You know how our parents romanticize it, right? I saw the ugliness. I saw the injustice. I felt the injustice. My bubbles were burst violently over and over and over. But through storytelling, I was able to understand from other people's perspectives how they felt and where I could resonate with them. This was a very personal journey for me, and Daria has been a very personal journey for me. It's been my entry into Sudan and being Sudanese the way I want to. And I say this because I know a lot of you want to be involved and don't know maybe how, but as someone who has kept their distance and was able to go there and still has this connection now, and it's growing and it's probably never going to break, because until today, and even if we don't end up having a country, Sudan is Sudan. It's in our heart. And if we don't do something for Sudan, then for what? So I'll stop here, and I hope this gave a few of you some ideas to find your way, find how you want to connect with Sudan. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Omnia. I hope you got to know this panel as much as I have in the past few days and enjoyed their opening remarks. I'll now start by posing questions to each of them, but good job, Omnia. I'm not crying. We had warnings that may happen with everyone. So before beginning this question to Omer, I think we must acknowledge the suffering of our people, who are enduring so much across Sudan, but especially in El Fasher, who are under siege and facing extreme starvation. And I think in this light, the theme of food, its rituals, and its meanings takes a much heavier weight. So food in Sudanese culture isn't really about sustenance. It's a language of care, of endurance, resilience, and occasionally of resistance. The ways we prepare, share, and preserve our food are deeply tied to our sense of belonging. So my question to you, Umar, is you have spoken in the past few days about Fatur as a moment of presence, intimacy, and community. So in the context of everyday Sudan, and especially during times of crisis, displacement, and conflict, how do you see the cultural practices around Fatur shaping connection, whether among families, strangers, or across communities?
Thank you. And thank you, Omnia, for that as well. Yeah, absolutely. Fatur means the first meal of the day. It's Fatur time right now. It would be nice if you're all arranged in circular tables. It'd be nice if we could magically have some Fatur at the moment. But yeah, as you mentioned, it's eating the Sudanese way is about sharing the tray, often sharing plates, and there's a unique intimacy that's created when dining in the Sudanese experience. So it's important to pay homage to that, and it's essential, really. It's kind of the glue between us. I think we can all resonate with that, and if you've had Sudanese food with Sudanese people, you can also understand that as well. And it doesn't have to be with people you know. Often that intimacy is extended to strangers as well, which is what's really special about the way we eat. So yeah, that's important to acknowledge, and in the everyday practices of Sudan. Specifically with Fatur, it's bringing people together. It's a nice intimacy, but the reality is, especially during peacetime, there was still a struggle. There was still a daily struggle. We can talk about how nice Fatur is and how great the culture is, which is wonderful, but the reality is a struggle. And we go back to Fatur, what's required to get those ingredients together wasn't always easy for everybody. I remember Fatur time around the coup, I don't know what year it was,
2021.
Yeah, the cool 21 one, but specifically when there was bread queues. Yeah, I'm not sure. Things around that period. And I had a bread card, and the card allowed me to buy bread just in my neighborhood. You'd have to go to the local bakery with your bread card, and that only allows you to buy bread in that bakery. There's a male queue and a female queue. Female queue is often served quicker. And yeah, I just remember that was part of daily life. In order to have breakfast, you need to get in the bread queue, and it's difficult. Some people, we were privileged. We were lucky to have those cards, have those queues. Other people did not have those cards, and getting bread, daily bread, was difficult. So yeah, it's important to recognize the struggle was the daily thing as well.
Yeah, and exactly. And the struggle being even before the war started.
Absolutely, before the war. Yeah, before the war for sure. And the struggle is real way before the war. Like we were talking about decades of political financial oppression, and we need to acknowledge that and the root of that, where it came from. And if you're unfamiliar, we should get familiar, because this is where we are today. It's a very protracted, long drawn out process that we need to remember.
There's the theoretical, I think, the positive side of food. I think I'll ask maybe a follow-up after all the panelists have had a chance to talk, but definitely about that contrast.
Exactly, the contradictions that are every day.
Perfect.
Exactly, thank you.
So thank you very much for that, Omer. I think we'll move on to Azza Aziz. So you've mentioned the identities, the trauma, and the belonging. So the war has had a devastating impact on daily life in Sudan and for the Sudanese, wherever they ended up. So there is this persistence, like you said, of everyday routines, however fractured or reimagined they are. They have become a quiet form of endurance. I know you don't like the word resilience very much. So endurance in the face of ongoing trauma. So what I'd like to hear is, how have you witnessed or experienced that continuation? What people hold on to and what they let go of, and how daily life reshapes itself after these moments? And how do you see these choices of what people do or they don't do, like you mentioned? How might objects, especially those tied to mobility, carry those stories through that lens of everyday Sudan? So we would like to expand on that.
Yeah, I just want to clarify slightly. I don't like the word resilience because I feel that it depoliticizes wars that have happened in Sudan, and it makes the Sudanese people have to bear the onus for things that are outside their control. So I think that what Sudanese people can control are little micro moments, so how they engage with objects, but it doesn't mean that this is to romanticize the use of these objects. So when we think about, for example, the evocation of gathering around food, it's now becoming a memory, but it's a problematic memory, but it's also part of our story as Sudanese about how this gathering, or how this coming together as a collective is being disrupted by outside forces. So I want these micro moments to really become politicized through the objects, through actually engaging or disengaging. So when I was speaking about the reference to the flamboyance, for example, that Sudanese people on social media are really going for each other, like the flamboyant weddings, or the fact that there is almost a disparaging of people engaging themselves in this way, and that there is no judgment to be made. This is the crystallization of the contradictions that exist within Sudan. So it's not to say there is the personal in terms of how people deal with their personal trauma, but I don't want to psychoanalyze people. I'm trying to just offer a contribution to understand the kind of violences, and I speak in the plural, the micro violences that exist in Sudan, which are crystallized by these contradictions, but by the fact that we are unable to accept our plurality in the sense that it's not a moral judgment. It's not about how people should or shouldn't do things. It's just about the reality of how people are doing things. And these real ways of doing things are a reflection of our problems or our strengths. So it's small histories of engaging with objects, but to create a kind of collective narrative of what we can control and what we can't control, and to understand the limits of what we can and can't control. So we can, if I wanted to present this as a lecture, I could give you a lecture about power or about what's happening and how we can't control, but that's not what people in Sudan are actually doing right now. What people in Sudan are actually grappling with right now is how to actually carry a key and to hold it in their memory in order to speak about a past and a future, but to engage with the past and the future in the dynamics of uncertainty. So it's the idea of improvisation. Through my work, this is not the first war I've actually kind of looked at. I looked at displacement. So this is a continuum of violences in Sudan. But I don't want to frame it that way. I am framing it that way, but I don't want to frame it that way because I don't want to give people a lecture about how they failed to see. I don't want it to be like, oh, people in Khartoum failed to see, because obviously there is the personal experience, but I want to take the personal experience. I want people to not, I don't want to lecture, but I want people to think about how the personal becomes part of the collective, so that we're kind of dipping into history and dipping out of it, and how we're engaging in representation, which is not necessarily the truth. It is a form of action which we need to critique. So I'm thinking that by actually presenting our culture a certain way, we can then work towards deconstructing our representation. So it's a continuous process. So it's not rigid or disembodied. The idea is that it's very connected to a territory, to a land, but the land is also bears so many symbols of real violences, political economy, politics, gender, difference, lack of acceptance of difference. And I want Sudan to move out of being this place which is exoticized, or like going back to a history. Of course, everybody takes pride in their history, but not to be stuck in a history which is not fluid. It's fluid. It needs to be critiqued as well. So these icons are, we're speaking about politics and art. So when you look at a piece of art, it's to actually look at it. If you hate it, not to disengage from it, to actually sit with that discomfort of why you hate this representation of Sudan, to sit with the discomfort of Sudan being a contradictory place. We are not wonderful people. We are just people. We're normal human beings. We exist in the world as normal human beings with the contradictions. And if we stop accusing each other through looking at how we actually engage in our everyday lives, there is actually maybe something that can come out of this tense conversation. I don't want us to shy away from the tense conversation.
Thank you very much, Azza, for that. I think it's a sentiment we all need to hear, and that has been repeated across many panels in the past few days. I am sorry we're digging into lunchtime, but maybe we'll get Omer to make us asida, some mulahna amia, as
Happily.
all right. So we'll move on to Simba. You did talk about this everyday beauty to Sudan. So you were the people watching, you got to see the pride in some cases, the patience, the rituals, and how these details shape the way people carry themselves. So my question to you is, through your work on Goodbye Julia specifically, you engaged deeply with the cultural differences between Sudanese ethnic groups. Could you share how these differences, reveal themselves through costume and character, and what they might tell us about, the social or the historical meanings behind them?
Okay. So yeah, I think Goodbye Julia was quite a unique experience because I did really go into like the cultural difference between South Sudan and like North Sudan, and like specifically Khartoum, women from Khartoum and women from South Sudan. It has been such a tough experience to actually also get the right, the right complexion of both of them. So yeah, I think one unique thing that I found out through the journey of like researching and looking into what South Sudan is and what North Sudan is was the fact that most of these ethnic groups have based their attires and their clothing on like the geographic place that they're in. So you would see traveling around Sudan that starting from north, most people are in white jalabiyas, uh, just to reflect the sunlight, like, live with it and bear the heat. And then when you go to the south, you find that they're more open and like there is difference in the way they dress, the hairstyles. It's been quite interesting. But I think what was even more interesting for me is when we came to build these characters, and we had to also be aware of the current context, Earlier I was speaking about how the 30 years of Omer al-Bashir, I've lived a quite, contradictory life where I wake up in the morning today and everything is fine. And then the next day, no, I cannot wear shorts for shara, cannot wear shorts for street. Girls cannot wear pants. So with time, we had like this drastic change. And then we also, when we came to make Goodbye Julia, we had to look at how do we make it culturally appropriate for today, for what Sudan is today. Even though Julia was South Sudanese, their culture is very liberal in a sense. She dresses, South Sudanese people are quite open when they come to the way they dress. But we still had to like have her in a nuskum or like a short sleeve instead of like a sleeveless top, just to like be appropriate also to the context and to the Sudani culture that's happening right now. So I think it has been both journeys of like exploring the cultures back then and exploring the current state of Khartoum and like Sudan right now and the people who are going to watch the movie. Yeah, I think it has been really interesting and it has been very sad to see it as well. But yeah, going back to the cultural difference, I think what was interesting the most is that I saw how Northern Sudanese have always tried to carry themselves or to just get as close to the Arab side of the world rather than accept and embrace our African culture. And in South Sudan, it has been very liberal. It has been very authentic to who they are. And I think this is what kind of, at some point, created the conflict between us and how they were what can I say? Okay, wait. Anyway, yeah, so their acceptance to their culture and embracing their rituals and their identity made it for us, I think, a bit hard to accept it because we have been facing a conflict of we want to fit into the Arab world, we want to fit into this Arab culture, but even though we had a completely different context, we're different ethnic groups, have different traditions, different rituals, so we still wanted to fit into the Arab world. We still wanted to get there. We still wanted to be into that. And we forgot our own rituals. We tried to redirect our rituals into fitting into that world, while South Sudanese have always kept it true to what they are and to what they have been doing. And that's my personal perspective. So just saying that, yeah, I think that's what.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think it's important and very insightful because, when we look at archive photos of Khartoum specifically, we do see that every period seems to have like a certain style, and it's not really about trends, but it's about maybe the ideology of who is ruling us. So it's very insightful to see these patterns and have them worded out like that. So thank you very much. There's a single. And then we'll go on to a question to Omnia and then read some of the questions that you've put in. So Omnia, as the founder of Andaria, you have brought a powerful digital and diasporic lens to this conversation we're having right now. You did mention this distance from Sudan giving you some sort of perspective into the work that you do. So you have achieved so much through Andaria by curating everyday Sudanese stories and carrying them across borders, platforms, and communities. What I'd love to hear is, both personally and professionally, how do these two perspectives, so one is your own lived experience in the diaspora, and two, your work in digital storytelling, so how these connect to everyday Sudan? How do these perspectives influence the way Sudanese identity is remembered, reimagined, and shared, both through the stories you choose to tell on your platform and the way you tell them across digital and diasporic spaces?
Thank you so much. Talk about a compounded question. I'll start with the personal. I already talked about my proximity was not really very close to Sudan, but then when I moved there, so before moving to Sudan to start Andariya, I was based in the US for about a year and a half. I spent a year in the Netherlands before that, so that was, continuation of my 10 years in Egypt. And when I was in the US, I was in California. This was 2013 to 2015. It was the social media kind of grip on people was really hard. And digital storytelling, there was a lot of platforms coming up. There was a lot of stories. There was a lot of personal narratives. In Egypt before, I was working as an environmental consultant at the time. Yeah, my background is environment, by the way. Did I mention that? No, biology, actually. And I started an environmental platform, but at the time it was a blog and I wasn't writing. So I'd find people who had interest in environmental issues and I would say, write about it. Sudanese living in Egypt. The platform was called Eco Options Egypt. I really regret not renewing that subscription when I decided to shut it down. One-man show, one-woman show, and then a bunch of writers who did incredible work about advocacy and eco living. So when I was in California, it was broader. It was picking up big time. You didn't have to kind of take the link from social media and try to circulate it. From a website. There was already social media. It's creating its own stories. There was X and there was Facebook and there was a lot going on. And I was enamored, ya Jama'a. Allow yourself to be impressed. I was impressed. I loved it. And then I met Salma and it was the first time we met. It was in Sudan. We met in Sudan. And our conversation was about there's so many stories in Sudan. There's so much going on. There's so much arts and culture. Why don't we do something? Why don't we create a platform? And we were not the first, by the way. I don't know if Ola is still in the room. She was in the panel with Salma yesterday. The 500 Words magazine, shout out to 500 Words, to Ola, to Issue, to Kutkut. I love you guys. They paved the way for digital storytelling. Essentially, there was, Sudan Tribune style newspapers or platforms, and then there was 500. So we came into that space knowing that there is something to tell. And at the time, we really believed in the digital. I mean, everybody was like, why don't you print? Like, no, not the giga, just wait for it. This was 2015. My parents joined WhatsApp, so that was my indication that we're going well. And then when we started it, we wanted to create a positive platform, a positive storytelling platform. So it started with essays, photo essays mostly, but then essentially positive stories. And this was Feb 2015. I believe I went to Juba in July. I know nobody. I don't know anything about Juba. And I just got on a plane and I was like, I want to know what's going on. Because we wanted to do this for Sudan and South Sudan. We wanted to create that dialogue between our generations, right? Again, I don't know much about Sudan until today, by the way. And I live in a household that does. My parents, my sister, they're extremely, I said that, engrossed in Sudan. I feel that I don't know a lot about Sudan. So I didn't even know much about South Sudan then. But getting on that plane and going to explore and then connecting with different people essentially started bringing in stories from South Sudan. Still positive stories, cultural stories. But then the ground started shifting under our feet very quickly. We started doing research. Then the revolution came, and then the coup came, and then the war came. And this is an 8-year trajectory. And in those 8 years, we pivoted so much. And I think for us, the idea was positive storytelling, but the execution kept changing. First, we were doing research. Then we started doing events. Then we started doing multimedia content. Then we started doing rumor tracking. Then we started doing rumor response and messaging in multiple languages that are now outside of just Sudan. So we have content in Amharic and so on. And we're now using AI to clone different voices in different languages. And hopefully, inshallah, next year, upgrade our website so that our website could be truly, truly multilingual. And throughout all of this, the positive storytelling, it didn't die, but it changed. So when we started, we did a call for content right after the war. So the war was April. This was probably October, September. All of that time, I have no idea. I was a zombie, ya Jama'a. I don't know. We were thinking, we were figuring it out, but we knew we wanted to stay. We knew we still had a role to play. So we opened the call, and the stories that came were horrifying. Truly, truly horrifying, but raw and important. And we couldn't go back and say,
make this a positive story. It was not. There was nothing positive about it. But we said, let's start using solutions journalism as our conversation starter with people. There's so much going on, but what are people doing about it? Because we know people are doing something about it. This is our reality. This is our lived personal reality. And we wanted our stories to start reflecting that. Then our research started reflecting that. We did research on hate speech. That was kind of for us because we're part of a digital environment. But then we started doing research that's like, what do you imagine? What do you want from Sudan? What do you imagine Sudan to be? We recently did a research on the militarization, the gendered militarization. And I think in general, where we're going with Anderia, and I hope we have another 10 years. We've done 10 years. We usually celebrate our birthday anniversary. But on the 10th, we didn't because things were so heavy. But we're still going. We have so many plans. We have so many partners. We're incredibly happy that there's people like Ether, Beam Report, so many new platforms that are coming up, respectable, serious platforms that are doing amazing work. The cultural space is also buzzing, as I think someone mentioned on the panel. There's now TikTokers and Instagram accounts and Facebook groups and all of these spaces where people are having serious conversations, and being part of that environment tells us that this is where the conversation is being had right now, because everyone online is connected to someone who's offline. And someone said this to me, that most people right now in Sudan are offline. The power situation, the access, you want to sell your phone and everything, you have to get food. That is a reality. We understand that. But also we tried to find the roots on the ground. So we started doing offline events. We had a space at some point called Anderia Park, beautiful space in Khartoum. We closed it down January 2023 because in May 2022, I called up Selma and I was like, "Fi harib jaya." So we set up the risk matrix and we just kept going, and then we decided that it was time. So our realities, whether they're real lived realities on the ground, or whether they're small huddles that we're having with our community, or bigger conversations or research that we're commissioning. Ruba's book is a conversation that started at Ozone, and it became a 3-year project resulting in a book. This is who we are. We're so connected, but we're always thinking how to make our platform respond, resonate, be relevant, and really be loved. We want to be loved. We want people to say, "You are important, stay," because every single day is a problem. So if you don't have that validation from the audience, you become directionless. And I really want to thank the audience, including people who are in this room. Thank you for giving us your time. I'll stop here.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Omnia. I do have some questions that came in. Mariam, do you have time for 3? Okay, thank you. So we do have, there are a lot of questions directed to Omar, so I think you'll have a conversation at lunch maybe after this.
No problem.
But I think we'll start with one to Omar. So, okay, so there's a question to Omar. So I'll just kind of combine 2 of them. So one was, how do you believe preserving and sharing culinary practice impacts both Sudanese identity and the global understanding of Sudan culture? So I think we'll speak to the other side of non-Sudanese people knowing Sudan through your work. And then what role do you see food playing in bridging this divide?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's an important one as well. Food is, for many cultures, the bridge between cultures. It's a great starting point to learn about one another's culture, and I think that's why I wanted to talk about Sudan and its issues through food, so that people can learn about the food. It's a great positive thing, as we mentioned, positive starting point to learn about culture, learn about people's recipes. It's a great things that people can tangibly try. They can have their preferences. And now everyone's got an opinion when it comes to food. It's a great talking point. It's a great conversation starter. And it's a great, exactly that, a conversation starter that after you can maybe talk about food, you can talk about other deeper issues as well. So it was important for me to use food as a lens through which non-Sudanese can learn about Sudan and its issues as well.
Yeah, I think that's a very good answer to that question. Thank you. So a second question I'll ask, it's a question to all, so feel free, whoever wants to add to that. But please allow me to comment on the phrasing of the question. So I'll just read it out loud, and it says, how has fanatical Islam affected your work and investigations in Sudan? But I think it's important. It is very important and crucial to differentiate between a religion being fanatical and the people who use that religion to do certain things as fanatical. It is in no way a fanatical religion, I believe, and I feel so many of us do. So I would like to hear from you guys on how, certain challenges of fanatical people have affected your work and experiences in Sudan. Yeah, feel free.
I think that definitely in my work, I found this is what I was speaking about earlier when I was speaking about narratives and storytelling versus discourses. So I think that 1989 built up towards contradictions that have existed in Sudanese society, which appeared benign, but were fostering for that climate of Khartoum being a hegemonic city, being a city which was pretending to be accommodating, because it was also a city which very contradictorily was a haven for people who the central state had actually displaced. So people were coming into Khartoum, and it was a safe space in the sense of security and just being protected from death. But in a way, it idealizes the idea of, is that what Sudanese people actually deserve? Do they just deserve a bare life? I mean, this is the idea of, are we just reduced to biological entities? I think we are not just biological entities. And I think this is what the violence of war does and imposes on us. It imposes on us survival. So the idea is, what I was trying to say earlier, is that when people have a problem with how we are engaging with our cultural, material culture, it's because they are saying the collective trauma is inappropriate. There is a judgment about how, if we're on kind of survivor mode, we are going to engage with our culture in a way which is less harmonious. So the idea is we are constantly engaging with culture, because if we're alive, we are engaging. How we're engaging, I don't want people to romanticize agency, for example. So the city of Khartoum is a city which, yes, provided protection, but it also provided constrained agency. So when I think about the South Sudanese people who came to Khartoum and were living on the fringes of the city, of course they were engaging in life. And my research shows that they were constantly decodifying Khartoum, but their knowledge was submerged. Their knowledge wasn't academic knowledge or written in a book or this. And this is the problem of how Khartoum is classed. So what we favor, and I'm not even speaking about the Sudanese state or the ideology of the Sudanese Islamist state. I'm speaking about other forms of hegemony. For example, middle class educational. We spoke about this yesterday in the panel about education, the value of education, Western education. Maybe that needs to be deconstructed. So this fits into how we're represented, even in what represents the right forms of knowledge which represent us. So we become complicit with these forms of knowledge because they are powerful forms of knowledge. So it's not just the Islamist state, it's the intersection of so many things that have created Khartoum as, I don't want to say a problematic city, but a city which needs constant revision. We need to go back to the layers of Khartoum and to actually, in a way, to use the metaphor of archaeology, excavate Khartoum so that we're able to actually understand and engage with embodied, real, not narratives as text. And I'm not against that because I'm an academic. I write text, but I realize that my texts also do violence. So I think, again, this is what I want people to really think about, this discomfort of the text and why we're writing in a certain way, who we're writing it for, because we engage in performance. We do, and we can't actually deny that. But to actually be cognizant of that is important. So I think that instead of saying, oh, it's about Islam, in Sudan, it's multiple identities, it's multiple Islams. People have their moments of doubt. We are policed a certain way. So if in the cultural norms. If you say I'm having slight doubts or my faith is slightly shaky, that's not acceptable. So we police ourselves as well. And I think now in this crisis that we're in, we need to allow ourselves the generosity to allow for vulnerability and for doubt and for uncertainty, because that is a form of action. And that how we engage with the uncertainty is through our material culture, because the materiality of Sudan is in how we engage with our culture as an artifact, but how we then deal with its contradictions, how we critique a set narrative of what these symbols actually mean, what we teach each other, and how we police each other about the signification of specific material objects. So when Omer is speaking, he's speaking about a form of engaging with food, which is more spontaneous because it's not as policed, because food is a basic need, but takes us out of bare life. It can be survival because we're victims, eternally victims, or we can speak about the fact that we deserve to think about food as a moment of sharing, gathering, sharing our culture and improvising our culture. It doesn't have to be this rigid. And I also don't want to romanticize the war. I don't think that the war is something that I don't think that as Sudanese we deserve to have this very harsh lesson. I think we are learning from this lesson to do better. But I also want to point out that there are also power dynamics that we as Sudanese, as normal Sudanese, I'm talking about ordinary normal Sudanese without vested interests, do not need to be subjected to the idea that they need to be resilient. We don't need to be resilient. We are resilient and we can be resilient, but that doesn't mean that we should be cornered into this form of glorifying resistance or resilience. There is a claim that we actually deserve not to have to endure.
Omer, you want to add to that? Okay.
And I actually want to add to that if I can.
Okay, so Simba.
Because actually that's a point that I've always, like, as I said, I've observing Sudan since I was a child. When I first opened my eyes in Khartoum, I just saw a lot of vibrant colors, a lot of beauty. And then with time, as the Islamic, adding to that, I just want to say that it's not Islam, it's the Islamic regime that we had. It kept oppressing people. It kept trying to reform us into this uniformed people. At some point, eventually with time, with lashing, with all the things that happened to women, to men, who were wearing shorts, long hair, all of these things were not accepted. I remember at some point I had a conversation with my mom, because I had long hair, and she was like, no, they're going to stop you outside and they're going to take you to jail and so on. And I'm like, Mom, I thought Prophet Muhammad has long hair. She was like, yeah, that's Prophet Muhammad. We're not Brian. That's Prophet Muhammad, not you. So it's eventually it got reshaped. It wasn't Islam. It was these Islamic regimes that tried to reshape our lives the way they thought it was. Eventually, Khartoum grew into a city that has women all wearing black abayas, which was so sad for me because I used to see women in tops, in colorful clothes, men all with shaved hair, trying to look like each other, trying to fit into this system, this regime, which was, that's what affected us. It's not the Islam. It did affect my personal job, but it just affected the daily life in Sudan that I used to see as very vibrant, which eventually ended up to be dark, black, sad, uniformed in a sense. Yeah,
Thank you very much for that, Simba. So I think the last question could actually be a prompt to our closing reflections. And it's a question to all. So I think in a broader sense, what obligations do each of you have to ensure that these everyday cultural practices are still alive and practiced for Sudanese people in the diaspora and, post-war Sudan? So maybe Omnia, you'd like to start with that? Yeah.
Thank you so much. I would say that, you mentioned that in 2021, we started creating content from the Eastern Horn of Africa. And in our attempt to connect our communities with others, still publishing bilingually about Ethiopia and Uganda and Kenya to our audience, and then, vice versa, our content to them in languages that they also can grapple with. we wanted to create those bridges, right? And, beyond us as diaspora, because that was a very busy time. Everybody was doing something. Nobody in 2021, before the coup, even after the coup, but before, that period of 2018 to 2021, there's so much going on. Everybody was trying to do something for Sudan. There was so much energy. And I started by saying, it's been a while since I felt welcome. And after the war, all our lives we've been, now I know, gaslit into, أطيب ناس وأحسن ناس. When the war happened, they shut their borders. They supported the war. So that attempt to kind of connect us to other countries, specifically the Eastern Horn of Africa, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough because some of these countries still cannot grapple with the fact that we are Sudanese because all they know is South Sudanese. Some of them have the harshest visa restrictions, the most expensive, the most corrupt. They drag you into all kinds of things. It's very disheartening. And all I can say is we need to do more. We need spaces like this where we are coexisting with others, sharing our pain, sharing our joy, sharing our experiences because they do matter. And just as I kind of parachuted into Sudan with negative knowledge about it and kind of worked my way through learning from others, from observing, from a safe distance for me, I was very content with how my proximity continued to be over these 8 years. It was just, it's not enough. Whatever we're doing, we need to do more. We need to communicate with our communities. We need to communicate with our communities outside. We need other people to connect with us and we need to find them. And there are, allies, lots of allies. There are lots of connections that could be made through diaspora, but also outside of diaspora, people who are not Sudanese, but they have some sort of proximity. There is just not enough of that going around while we continue to suffer from the lack of these relationships continually every single day. And as long as we are at war, but even after, hopefully in a reconstruction development, beyond the transitional period, the Jaya, but that effort should really not stop because, as I think it was Yusra Bagher who said, the world is getting smaller. I was following what was going on in Lithuania yesterday, and that feels very, very close to me, and I think that's on us right now to continue to create these spaces and to continue to go where we are welcomed. That is very important, and to call out people who do not respect us, who do not, who harm us actively. And continuing to tell our stories in the rawest form, absolutely unapologetic and absolutely exposed, because we are.
Thank you very much for that, Omnia. Thank you. Omar, you'd like to? Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree with Omnia. And just to remember the interconnectedness of all the struggles that are collectively happening across the globe, particularly with Sudan, I think, as Yusra mentioned as well, the call for action. We need more visibility. We need more understanding about the issues. Even people who don't know that much about Sudan, doing the work that they're doing to shed light on the roots of this war in Sudan, and calling out people that need to be called out. Essentially, getting people into put more pressure on the UAE, and to have more information about the roots of this, and to really break down the misinformation that's going on around the war.
Yes, thank you for that. These are good steps to put. So maybe we'll do Azza and then Simba and Donna. Yeah.
My last remark is to just really maybe focus on the people in Sudan doing things in praxis, really just not engaging in representing or even trying to make Sudan appear something it's not, but to actually just observe the everyday efforts for people in Sudan to move beyond mere survival, to just actually think about our position being outside of Sudan and how that informs a kind of representation of Sudan, which is partial. I wouldn't say that it's inaccurate, but it's partial. And I just want to establish a kind of a dialogue with the people within Sudan so that those tensions aren't effaced.
Thank you for that, Omnia. After that, Simba. No.
Yeah, so as I just said, outside Sudan, and I'd like to close with the fact that working on cinema, I feel applied always to just reflect Sudan the way I think it is or the way I've experienced it. So working in Cardiff recently, we had to shoot Sudan outside Sudan, and this was a very interesting experience. At some point, I really was so keen. I would just follow every detail and be like, this is what Sudan is. This is how I've seen it. This is how I experience it. And I think this is important. And I think it's also important to support cinema, Sudanese cinema, and have it reach out to as many people as possible, just because that's the way we could also tell something about Sudan, and we can share what Sudan is and how it looks like, our culture, our rituals, our daily life. Yeah, so, yep, I think we need to just also support Sudanese cinema and make sure that it reflects what Sudan is really. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Simba, and everyone. So as we close, I'd like to thank all of you for being here in this panel. I'd like to thank our speakers who have not only shared their work, but their personal lived experiences of Sudan. I think what we've heard today reminds us that, even in the face of war, the everyday Sudan continues. It can continue quietly or powerfully or creatively. And I think it's in these daily acts that, memory is safeguarded, identity is shaped, and, heritage lives on. So thank you all for being part of this conversation, and thank you